Hello, thank you for watching my channel today. My name is Sarah and my channel is called Your True Shelf. Today it is my favourite video to film of the entire year, which is my top books of 2022. So I am a little bit late in posting this, but it's just because I've been really busy. And so I thought I'd start with some stats of the reading year that I had last year, and then we'll move on to my top books. I couldn't narrow it down to 10, so I have got 12 just because it was just too hard to just have 10 books. So if we start with my stats, I had a goal of reading 100 books last year, and I actually exceeded the goal, which was really good. So I read 112 books last year, which totaled 34,424 pages. And when I looked back at the number of pages I read last year, when I read 97 books, it was actually 10,000 pages less. So I must have read much shorter books last year. But I will insert pictures of Storygraph in this because this is where I'm pulling my stats from. In terms of the genres that I read the most of, so my most popular genre was contemporary, which I was a little bit surprised by, where that was, I think it looks like 34 books that I read were contemporary books, followed by historical, which I was also surprised by. I love historical books, but I wouldn't have picked that as what I thought was my second genre. Then it was literary fiction, followed by LGBTQIA+, and romance was my top 5 genres. My longest book that I read last year was The Pickwick Papers by Charles Dickens, which was a massive 848 pages. And my shortest book I read was We Should All Be Feminists by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which was only 52 pages. The average length was 320 pages, but it says that it took me around 13 days to finish each book. Now, I know why it says that, because obviously it didn't, otherwise I wouldn't have read 112 books. It's because the book I spent most time on was Monty Don's My Garden World at 301 days. And the reason... So that's obviously massively skewed the numbers, but the reason I spent that long reading it was because it's a month-by-month book, and I was reading it month by month. So I was reading about that month while it was that month in real life. So that's why it took me such a long time. And my average book rating was 4.15 stars. The most popular book I read last year was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which I really loved. And the least popular book I read was Calm Before the Storm, which was a Dawson's Creek book, which Sean and Bert bought for me. The highest rated book that I read last year was Know My Name by Chanel Miller. And I apparently explored 80 new authors and read 25 books which were part of a series. I had one reread, which was Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo, which I read again for book club and very much loved even more the second time. And I only had one DNF, which was A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. I am quite bad at DNFing, but I am endeavouring to get better at it as time goes by. So that is my stats from last year, which I always like to think about, and I always like to see other people's stats as well. And now let's move on to my top 12 books of 2022. Some of these were library books, some of them were on Audible, so I don't have physical copies of all of them, but I will hold up the ones that I do and insert pictures for the others. So at number 12 is NonFiction. It is What White People Can Do Next by Emma Dabry, subtitled From Allyship to Coalition. This is quite a short book with a beautiful cover, which I listened to, and Emma Dabry reads it herself. And I just found it the most original and resonant book on race. I thought that how Emma Dabry, her take as a woman of colour, her take on allyship and coalition, she prefers using the word coalition to allyship, and she really delves into why that is. She delves into all of the things which come up on social media a lot, and all the things people are trying to do to be anti-racist and educate themselves, and she really kind of pulls them apart and looks at, are these logical steps, would it make more sense to do it this way? And her ideas were so fresh, and I just felt that they really resonated with me, and I think she's an amazing author. I really like watching her social media accounts, and I'm looking forward to reading her other book, which I own but haven't read yet. So I felt this was really refreshing, spot on really, and I really, really enjoyed it, as well as learning from it at the same time. Number 11 is a book that I do have in my hands. Babel by R.F. Kuang. So this is a chunky book, and this is a special edition with the black sprayed edges, which I really love. This book was fantastic. This is a fantasy book set in Oxford University in the 1800s. And we're following our main protagonist is called Robin Swift. He is Chinese, and he was taken when he was a little boy, when his mum died, by a man called Professor Lovell, who came from Oxford University. And he used some magic in the form of a silver bar, and he brought Robin back to Oxford. And Robin is there at the Institute of Translation, which is called Babel, and he's there with other people from around the world who speak different languages. He is educated in ancient and modern languages, and the way that the magic system works is by having language pairs from two different languages where they use the same word which means slightly different things, and engrave it on each side of a silver bar, and then that word will do what the meaning of the word is with the silver bar. And it's basically not only a look at the university and the class system in the university, but also there's so much in here about colonialism and about the theft of language from other countries for the British Empire's gain. And R.F. Kuang is actually an academic herself, and her special area of interest is language, and there is lots of etymology in this book. There's lots about Chinese language and characters, and I found it really, really interesting. She's so talented as a writer, but also clearly so passionate and knowledgeable about her subject, and she really brings this through, as well as making it exciting and talking about colonialism at the same time. So this was fantastic. Next, at number 10, I have a book which is completely different from that because it's a classic. I read this earlier this year and I absolutely loved it, and it is Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. So, and this is a lovely clothbound classics edition. I thought that I hadn't read Thomas Hardy before. I'd watched Tess of the D'Urbervilles BBC adaptation, and I've watched Far From the Madding Crowd, but this was the first one that I read, and I really, really loved it. I love Thomas Hardy's writing style. I buddy read this with Joe Smith, and it was a great one to pull apart and talk about together. Thomas Hardy isn't hard to read. He writes really beautifully about the scenery, the countryside, and love as well. And I really, really loved Tess. It is a sad book. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it is sad. There are some things which are difficult to read about which happen in here, and I felt that Thomas Hardy is very kind of modern in his ideas, and I'd really like to read some work about him as a person, because a lot of the ideas that he puts forward in his book, despite this being written in the Victorian time period, are very modern ideas about sort of religion, class, feminism, those kind of things. So I thought this was brilliant. So what's the book actually about? I haven't really said that. So we're following Tess D'Urberville, who is from a family who live in the country. They're quite poor, and her dad is bit hopeless, bit of a gambler, bit of a drinker, and her dad finds out that they might be related to this D'Urberville family who are really wealthy. So he decides he wants to go and try and find some D'Urberville ancestors to see if they can get some money from them, because he thinks they're related. And this is where Alec D'Urberville comes into the scene, who will have a lifelong impact on Tess. And Tess also falls in love with a man called Angel Clare, and it's sort of like a bit of a love triangle between the three of them, and with some difficult reading matter in. So I thought it was wonderful, and I'm going to read more Thomas Hardy this year for sure. The next book I listened to on Audible, and it's a contemporary book, and it was Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. This was absolutely brilliant. It was narrated by Amelia Fox, and I think she's got a really beautiful voice, and she narrated it so well, especially because she's an actress. I thought that she really brought it to life. This is about our protagonist called Martha, who is from a wealthy family. It's her sister and her parents. She's grown up, and she has a mental illness which is never named in the book. It's just, I believe, kind of like a line in the book. So we're never told what it is, but I think it's probably bipolar. And it's about Martha and her husband and her sister and her parents. And Martha is very self-centered, very difficult to live with. She has this sort of husband who is really patient and really kind, and her sister is hilarious. So this reminded me a bit of Fleabag. If you like Fleabag on BBC, I pictured Martha's sister as the main character's sister in Fleabag, because they're really quite similar. I laughed out loud so many times reading this because there's a lot of kind of sarcastic, dry humour in this, and I thought it was just so funny, as well as dealing with really serious day-to-day implications of having a mental illness and what it's like, not only for the person but for their family. It's just, I don't know, it's just really funny and really well written, and Amelia Fox does a brilliant job. But like I say, there are serious themes of mental illness in the book. Book number 8 is one that I listened to again, and that is The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. So this is the first in a trilogy, and I've only read the first one so far. This is set in Pompeii before, obviously, Mount Vesuvius erupts and buries the whole thing, but not that long before, so I don't know if that's going to figure in the trilogy. And we are following Amara, who was grown up as the daughter of a doctor and quite a sort of middle class family. And when her dad dies, her mum sells her as a concubine, and she basically then becomes a sex slave. So it's set in a brothel in Pompeii, and it's following Amara and the other sex slaves in the brothel. And they're the guy who's like in charge of the brothel as well. And Amara she's really clever, and so she is trying to win the favour of the boss by thinking of ways he could earn money and things, and also hope that she'll then be able to get out of the sex work that she has to do and buy her freedom. I found it's very raw, so there's probably things which are quite triggering for people in this, and I found that the location and the time period was really, really well done. So you could really feel like you were in the streets of Pompeii, feeling the heat, smelling the smells, eating the food, seeing the men, experiencing the female friendships in this book. And I really felt that this was really a wonderful description of what it might have been like in Pompeii in that time. And I can't wait to read the next one, because the second one has come out now, and I'm really looking forward to that. It's got the same narrator on Audible, so I think I'll probably listen to it again because I really liked the narrator. Book number 7 on the list is Milkman by Anna Burns, which won the Booker Prize in 2018. Now, I was told by several people, if you're going to read this book, listen to it, because number 1, it's extremely dense in the actual book. It's basically like this the whole way through. And the narrator is amazing. So this is set in Northern Ireland, and the narrator has the most beautiful Northern Irish accent and brings it to life so well. So I even started to think with a Northern Irish voice in my head while I was listening to it, because you get so immersed in it, and I love the accent so much. And we're following characters who don't have any names. So we've got, for instance, like first daughter, second daughter, brother-in-law, sister, maybe boyfriend, like they're just all called those kind of titles, so you don't forget who anyone is because you know the titles. And it's set in the Troubles, and so there's lots, it's, you know, all around sort of Catholics and Protestants and the fighting in the 80s in from the IRA and stuff. And it's set like it's another book where it's covering serious subject matter, and there's some really hard to read bits in it, but it's also incredibly funny as well. And I just got so immersed in this girl. So we're following a girl who's a teenager and what's happening to her, and she's being followed by this man who is called the Milkman, and people start thinking that she's in a relationship with him, but she really doesn't have anything to do with him. He just keeps turning up and speaking to her and stuff. And it's about all the kind of repercussions of things, small events that happen in their lives as the family, in the times and the community that they are living in, and just the relationships and the dialogue was so good in this. And it was, I would read again anything that Anna Burns writes, but I would agree, if you want to read this book, go for the audible version because it's so well done. And I just think this would be really, really dense if you tried to read it, because there's no real paragraphs, there's no speech marks. I think it would just be definitely the best plan to listen to it. Book number 6 is another one that I listen to on audio. I feel like there's a real theme that the ones I listen to on audio tend to be the ones that I make my list. I don't know if it's because they get brought to life more or whatever, but this is The Paper Palace by Miranda Heller. This is a book that I read because it was on the Women's Prize long list. I was gutted it didn't make the shortlist, because for me, I think it was probably my favourite book of the shortlist. This is about a woman called Elle, who, when we first open the book, Elle has gone to this cabin which her family go to every summer to spend the summer there, and there's a lot of water around the cabin and it's sort of falling to pieces, but they have stayed there every year with their family. And Elle has a family friend called Jonas, who she's known ever since she was a kid, and he's also spending the summer there with his wife. And Elle and Jonas have sex like against the side of the building while both their families are indoors. And then it goes, so that is just set in that 24-hour period, and then we're going between each hour, we're going back to Elle's childhood and even her mum's childhood, and learning about how the things that have happened to their family have impacted on the future of the family, how people who were quite difficult and quite traumatized, what's happened to them as they were younger to bring them to the way they are now, and also learning about how Elle and Jonas first met and what is she going to do after she's had sex with him. And I couldn't stop listening to it. I liked the narrator again. It was very evocative of the summer. There was lots about water and metaphors around water. I really liked the love stories that were in the book as well, and I felt that it was very real. It's set in contemporary times, but it does go back in time to previous previous generations and previous time periods. So I thought it was fantastic, and I would highly recommend. Book number 5 is another audio, a non-fiction book which is read by the author, which was incredible, and this is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So that was the highest rated book of the year on Storygraph at 4.85, and I totally understand why, because this is a phenomenal book. So Chanel Miller was living in the same town that Stanford University is in. She wasn't a student there, but she went to a campus party just on a whim one night, and she was sexually assaulted in the grounds of the university, and the man was caught. So we know who did it, and it goes through Chanel's whole experience from before the night, right the way through the night, to waking up in hospital, not knowing what had happened to her, going through all of the forensic examination, going through all of the emotions and the feelings that have gone through her mind and her body throughout the whole period from the night to the court date when it goes to trial. and all of the media that happened, about people's reactions, and about how when she wrote her witness statement that it was released online and it got 1 million views in 24 hours. And that's really how Chanel's story came to be born in the public eye. And there's so much in there about what women have to cope with as women, about how men treat them, about how they are constantly like, you know, catcalled, how they can be followed, how men can just like not take no for an answer when we're trying to get away from them. Just about things like how women don't feel safe a lot of the time. And Chanel writes so beautifully, and she describes her emotions and her feelings so well. So well. And listening to her read it has an extra poignancy, because you really feel it. And when she reads her witness statement out, her voice cracks a couple of times and it made me cry. It was just an incredible book. Obviously there's a huge trigger for sexual assault and rape in this book, but I think if you can read it, it will add, whether you're a man or a woman, it will add layers to your life, and learning about her experience done so beautifully. So I take my hat off to Chanel. I think she's wonderful, and it's an incredible book. Number 4 is a book that I read for book club this year, which had been on my TBR for absolutely ages, and I hadn't read it because it was quite a big book, and it's the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. So this book is amazing. This is set in the Congo, and it is following the Price family. So they go over, the dad is a preacher, and he takes his wife and 4 little girls over to Congo. I think it's set in like I want to say like maybe the 50s, but it covers quite a large period of time, and it also goes back and forward in time too. There's a few bits at the beginning of each chapter set in the present day, and all of the girls are really different. So we hear each chapter is told from a different perspective, either a different daughter or the dad, and the dad is such a clown. Like I don't personally approve at all of missionary work, because I don't think it's right to take one's own beliefs, typically Christian beliefs, and try and enforce them on another culture and then claim superiority. I just think that is not a concept that I approve of whatsoever. But the dad is he tries to speak the local language, and he just cocks it up all the time, and things he says don't make any sense, and he thinks he knows best. He thinks as a white man he knows better than the black people who live there. So like just little things, for instance, like he takes all these seeds and plants to plant there, and one of the women from the village says that you can't plant them like this, you have to, because of the weather, you have to plant them in mounds. And bless her heart, he won't listen, and overnight she redoes them all for him, and he comes out in the morning, just kicks it all over all her work, because he's like, I know best, and surprise, none of his plants grow. So it's just like that he's just an idiot, but he gets more and more crazy as well, like the longer that the book goes on, in his ideas and how he carries himself and everything. And just following his daughters growing up in this environment as well, and we learn about the people who live in the village and their culture and their beliefs, and we get to know and love the characters in this book. This is a real sort of saga. You spend so much time with these characters that you feel like you know them really well, and you will think about them after the book's finished. We love discussing this at book club. I think it makes a great book club book, even though it's very big, because it was just so incredible. And I've read one other Barbara Kingsolver, Flight Behaviour, but I would like to read more by her. So we're into the top 3. So book number 3 of the year is another non-fiction, which is The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. So this is a spiritual book, and this is basically Michael Singer is somebody that I came across via Oprah, via her Super Soul Sunday podcast because we can't get the show in the UK, frustratingly. And I read a book by him last year called The Untethered Soul, and this is the surrender experiment. Is basically the idea of we try to manage and micromanage our lives, yet if we look at the earth as a whole, all of the things that happen in nature happen without anyone trying to manage them. So like the seasons, the weather, the cycles of life in animals, like all these things happen without us trying to manage them. And so he's taken the concept of, he started getting really into meditation and things, and by finding this sort of peace in his life, he wanted to live really simply, and he wanted to basically say yes to whatever comes along. So trust in the universe guiding him and just accept with grace what happens and see where it takes him. So instead of getting really like, I can't believe this has happened, why has this happened to me, just having peace with it and accepting it and seeing what happens next. So that's why it's called the surrender experiment. And he lives the most incredible life based on the meditation that he does, the spiritual thinking that he does, and the openness to whatever happens, like just being completely open. He just gets the most incredible experiences happen to him, and it's like really kind of beyond belief, some of the things. And I wouldn't say that this book has any kind of religious focus. I'm not into religion, I'm just into spirituality. And Michael Singer has done a lot for me, and I definitely have thought about this book and its principles going throughout the year, which is why I've chosen this as one of my top books. I will definitely listen to this again. He reads this himself. I have got my own copy on Kindle, but I listened to him reading this himself. There were a couple of things that I just wanted to say, like for instance, he is quite a privileged position in that when he first starts the book in the 70s, his dad has given him some money to help him start off in life, and he doesn't have much in the way of financial commitments and stuff. So he is in quite a privileged position, which isn't acknowledged at the beginning. And I found that it would have been better to say the position that I'm living in wouldn't be possible for everybody. But aside from that, I got a lot from this. I think he's incredible, and I would really, really recommend this book. So we're down to our top 2. So the second book of the year is another one from Book Club, which I absolutely loved. I do own the physical copy. I did listen to it on Audible again. And it is The Girl with the Loud Voice by Abi Dare. I love this book so much. We are in Nigeria for this book, and we are following Adoni, who is a young girl who is growing up with her 2 brothers, and sadly her mum dies when she's about 12, and her dad decides he's going to marry her to an old man because he doesn't have enough money, and he wants the money from this man that he'll pay for his daughter. So he basically sells her into this marriage, and she's torn away from her family home. She's terrified. She doesn't know like what sex is. She doesn't know what's going to happen to her. And she is married off to this old man, and we follow her through the next probably, I'd say like 4 to 6 years in the twists and turns that her life takes. And one of the reasons I love this book so much is Adoni is the most incredible girl. She has such a big heart. Like, she's grieving for her mum so much. She's missing her brothers. She's wondering if they're okay. She doesn't really have a place in life. She's treated like a slave. And she is just looked down on by higher class Nigerian people. And she always keeps her heart full of love and kindness and hope. And she's such an uplifting character. I really, really would love it if Abi Dare wrote more about her in the future, because I'd love to know what happens to Adoni next, because I still think about her and I can't really tell you too much about the other characters in the book because it would spoil what happens after she gets married. But if you want to go on a beautiful journey of a coming of age story through Nigeria, then this is the book for you. It's just so beautiful, and I absolutely loved it. I really loved it. So it says on the front, a story of courage that will win over your heart. I would say that's a very apt description. So the number one book that I read at the time I made this list for 2022 was another book I listened to, which was Still Life by Sarah Winman. This was an incredible book. Every book I've read so far by Sarah Winman has been 5 stars for me, and I think this is the strongest one yet. This is a book where you will never forget about the characters. This follows our main character. Is called Ulysses Temper. He's known as Temps in the book. And he's grown up in London. Before the war started, he married a girl called Peggy, and then he went off to war, and he meets a very close friend while he's away at war, and he also meets a woman called Evelyn Skinner, who is much older, and they have like a brief encounter as friends. And we hear from Evelyn's story and Temps's story, so we assume that they're going to meet up again at some time within the book. Temps has a whole host of characters with him because he spends a lot of time in this pub in London, and Peggy works in the pub, his wife, and he also has other characters like the main barman in there, and there's like a guy who's this sort of single guy. He's quite a sort of wise guy that everyone loves, and Temps is in Italy, and his life ends up after the war moving to Italy, and so it's about his family, who are his chosen family, and what happens to Evelyn, and also what happens to Temps and his chosen family as their lives all intermingle and come together and move apart over a lot of years, all the way through Ulysses' life. And you cannot but love all of the characters in this book. They are all really fleshed out, funny, lovable, joyful, hopeful. They're into lots of different things. There's like different class of people in this book. So like there's sort of the East End of London pub friends, and then Evelyn is like an older woman with a lot of education. She works in art. She's a lesbian, and it's just the most beautiful story of weaving all their lives together. And there's a parrot in the story, which is hilarious. He like quotes Shakespeare and comes out with the most hilarious sayings in the book as well. And the parrot is a fully formed character in the book, which is why there's a parrot on the cover. And I just thought this was amazing. It was one that will stay with me for a really long time. I'd really happily reread it. I still think about the characters again, and for me, like, still remembering all the characters' names and the plot and everything just means that it was a book that I really loved. And I've only got, I think, one more Sarah Winman book that I haven't read, which I do own, and if anyone hasn't read Sarah Winman, you're in for a real treat with her because she's wonderful. So that was my top books of the year. I have made a bullet journal spread here of all of the books, and let's hold that up so you can see. If you have read any of these books, then please do tell me what your thoughts were about them. If you have made a best books of the year video, please link it in the comments so that I can go and watch it. And if you just want to tell me what were your top books of the year, then please do, because I'd love to know. I hope that 2023 has started off really well in terms of reading and in life in general, and I hope that you have a lovely week and a lovely year. Speak to you soon. Bye.